Joe, we continue doing our power rankings. We've gone through 3 of the 4 Power 4 conferences. Tonight we end on the SEC, given our conference champion as well. I want to make this known before we get started in all of this. I know that we're not going to break down 2 through 7, 2 through 8 to start off with, but I want to preface now, because I'm going to say this again later, make the argument 2 through 7. I will listen. I might not agree, but I am going to listen to the argument. But we're going to start from 9 through 16 in the SEC. Joe, you want to read your list off first, who you have 9 through 16 in the SEC.
At 16, everybody is shocked. I've got Vanderbilt number 5. This is the lowest graded team to ever receive first place votes in the media poll. Number 15, Mississippi State. Number 14, Arkansas. 13, Florida. 12, South Carolina. 11, Auburn. 10, Oklahoma. 9, Kentucky.
Yeah, so my 9 through 16 at 9, Texas A&M. 10, Kentucky. 11, Florida, 12, Auburn, 13, South Carolina, 14, Mississippi State, Arkansas at 15. And as everybody, as you alluded to, Joe, our last one there is Vanderbilt at 16. Let me ask you a question, because I consider Oklahoma to be in that 2 through 7, 2 through 8 mix, right in the SEC. I'm very curious to see that you have them at 10 here at your power rankings. Can you explain why?
Look, I think that their defense is going to be very formidable. I think that this whole front 7 that they have is super strong. It's very reminiscent to what Venables had when he was the defensive coordinator at Clemson. Beefy in the middle, some pretty underrated linebackers. Danny Stutzman's going to be great. I worry about that offensive line. When you're trying to rotate that many players in, it is not typically a recipe for success. There is a ton of turnover, and especially 2 tackles that you're having to replace. Walter Rouse last year was great for you guys, and you're going on to replace, again, multiple offensive linemen. I am super freaking high on Deion Burks, the receiver that you brought in from Purdue. I think that Jackson Arnold could be good, but a first-time starter behind a pretty brand new offensive line trying to develop chemistry does not go well. I had to go with some of these other options ahead of them that I felt a little bit more, less gross about. Texas A&M is really freaking good on defense, and so is Kentucky.
So, look, it appears to, and I'm throwing this out there, they're in my fall camp intel, meeting Oklahoma. Jackson Arnold threw 2 picks, this weekend. Casey Thompson allegedly outplayed him. Well, look, we'll get to that in a little while. Here's the thing. I don't know what to do with Oklahoma, because I look at their schedule. Joe, they come into the SEC. They got Tennessee at home, then Auburn on the road. And everybody's going to just assume, all their fans are going to pencil Auburn as a win. You better not do that going into Jordan-Hare.
Yeah.
You cannot do that. So, Joe, let's look at their schedule in the SEC. Let's say you split Tennessee and Auburn. Let's say you split against Texas and South Carolina. Joe, the last 4 games that they have in this conference are pretty brutal in and of themselves. You're at Ole Miss, you're at Missouri, and they don't want to hear the argument about Mizzou, and I get that. They have Alabama at home, then they go to LSU. Joe, I don't disagree with you on them being at 10, because I look at their schedule. Even if they do beat Tennessee and Auburn, they're a middle of the pack team potentially. I just don't know. When I look at your list, I don't know if Texas A&M is better than them. I don't know if Kentucky is better than them. I don't know if Missouri technically is better than them. But to what you put down in your power rankings, Missouri doesn't play a tougher schedule than them. Okay,
well, but we're not truly just basing this off of this is power ranking. It's not a projection. This is more
But I can make the argument. Team. I can make the argument that Missouri, what they have to replace defensively, is going to be tough.
And I was very critical of that, and I did point that out. But they also have a really explosive core with Theo Weiss and Luther Burden and Brady Cook. That is extremely valuable to have 3 important players returning on offense and a starting quarterback who looked really good down the stretch. Uncertainty at offensive line and a new quarterback is one of the biggest red flags that I could have. Could Oklahoma, here, this is something that's going to get not understood or completely ignored by Oklahoma fans who get mad at this take. Oklahoma can finish in the top 6 or higher. They absolutely could. If Jackson Arnold plays well and the offensive line meshes, they 1,000% can. But right now, in the beginning of August, I am not going to put my faith in a team that has a brand new offensive line and a kid who played one bowl game and threw a bunch of interceptions against Arizona, a Big 12 team. I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, look, Joe, basically what we're saying is Tennessee and Missouri are better than them. Because
I could say that very confidently.
I don't know if you can say very confidently for Mizzou, but we'll see. Look, Joe, I don't think that they're going to go 0 for 4 in the last 4 weeks of their schedule, but they could, and we'll have to wait and see. Anything in 9 through 12 that you see on mine that you had questions on?
Yeah, this is very, very nitpicky for two of these schools.
If you're asking me why I got Mississippi State at 14, I swear to God, I'm going to freak out.
I mean, I think that Mississippi State is incredibly overrated in this situation and where you have them, but that's not where my eye went to. I'm talking about Florida feels a little too high, and I understand that Arkansas has a giant circle around it for Pittman's probably going to get fired. But I do believe that Taylor Green, Bobby Petrino, that offense is going to be more explosive than we're willing to give them credit for. And if they're competitive, they deserve to be a couple spots higher than second to last.
I'm out.
They've got a lot. They have a little bit more juice than Mississippi State does. They should be ahead of Mississippi State.
I don't agree with that. Okay. All right. Well, I thought you were going to continue, but
no, that's it. I'm not that high on Chapin. I'm really not that high on Chapin or Levy. I think that they could eventually be good. But
are you that way? You just talked about with Oklahoma, new quarterback, shaky offensive line. Arkansas's got that, but worse. Joe, they have a white kid on the perimeter that might be their biggest target. Elon Musk's favorite college football player, that being Tesla. Okay, they are. Bill Connolly ranked their linebacker room as the worst in not only the SEC, the worst in the country. They're having to replace pieces at the secondary. They do have a pretty decent defensive line. I get that. Defensively, they played a lot better. Joe, down the stretch, every single game last year, Sam Pittman, who is the lean man, lost them the game to some capacity, and that is what I'm not banking in on. Like, I do think that when it games down to the line, if Jeff Lebby needs to score a touchdown on Arkansas, they're going to do it.
I see. I just don't understand why you have so much more confidence for Mississippi State, whose roster was pretty mediocre last year. They didn't bring any premier players.
I don't think that their roster was. I see. Here's where I disagree.
They lost a bunch of guys. They lost their running back to USC.
They did, but I don't think their roster had some key parts like their secondary. I thought they brought in some very sneaky offensive line guys from the portal. Joe, guys that probably would have been starting in the SEC this year. I think they really are being overlooked at what they are doing along the offensive line. By the way, I will remind people, they beat a 9-3 team Arizona team last year. And Joe, they literally week to week were running different sets of offensive personnel and play calling. Terminology was different. Personnel was different. One week they come out in 12 personnel. The next week they're coming out 5 wide trying to go through the air raid. I like Jeff Lebby a lot. I think that they're just going to score at will. I really do.
I just don't see the receivers that they have ready to score at will. I think in 2 yeyears, totally, they can build up a team that can do
14, that. Joe, it's not like it's not like I have them above there. I'm just saying they're better than Arkansas.
I'm willing to take the shot on Taylor Green's skill set playing in that Petrino offense. That couldn't be a more perfect pairing.
Let me ask you this question. Bobby Petrino was the OC at Texas A&M. I get Jimbo was much different last year. He still – hold on. But when Jimbo got fired, why didn't things get better?
Weren't they? Because they were down to Max Johnson. They were dealing with a ton of offensive injuries.
But Joe, I've been a part of a beat where coaches have been fired midseason and production goes up.
But their offense, it didn't skyrocket, but their offense was a lot more opened up than it was before Jimbo got fired.
But I didn't say it wasn't more opened up. I asked you, why didn't it get better statistically?
I mean, I don't know off the top of my head what the numbers were. It didn't feel like that there was a drop off.
Okay. There wasn't a drop off. There also wasn't a gain either. So
because you were working with a backup quarterback.
So was Jimbo. So were other teams. And your point, Max Johnson.
Other teams. We're talking about Texas A&M.
On the road,
Max Johnson's not good.
Max Johnson on the road almost beat Ole Miss last year, and you're gonna say he's not good.
But that's a great point to support how Bobby Petrino. That was one of the best offensive games of the season.
Jimbo was still the head coach for Ole Miss.
But that still was one of the best offensive games of the season.
Again, Jimbo was still there. If you're going to nitpick with me in 14 and 15, okay, then I know that I've done a very good job.
No, that means that I
didn't say.
God forbid I have an argument with you over it. Doesn't mean you do.
No, you talked about Mississippi State's receivers. Tesla.
I don't care. I'm pointing out that I think that
who's he throwing it to? You're talking about Taylor Green and Bobby Petrino. Who's he throwing it to?
Their receiver room is to be determined.
It's offensive line.
Okay, but who was Lamar Jackson throwing to when he was as productive as he was? I'm not comparing Taylor Green to Lamar Jackson.
The only time Lamar Jackson ever played an SEC team, Devin White legitimately tracked him down.
That's not a part of the conversation. That has nothing to do with the conversation.
You brought it up.
Lamar Jackson was
when Bobby Petrino had
a Bobby Petrino
quarterback, and he played an SEC team. He got his shit pushed in.
That doesn't have anything to do with the conversation. I'm just trying to point out. I'm trying to point out because I'm trying to point out offensive production and a skill set for a quarterback. The conference doesn't have anything to do with it. His offensive production has been fantastic when he's at the athletic, traitsy quarterbacks, and Taylor Green is the epitome of that. I'm just putting a little bit of faith in him.
He had a 55% completion percentage at Boise. Yeah, it's going to get much better in the SEC.
You have this weird turn on for Mississippi State. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Because I put him at 14. I put him at 5 and 7.
It all comes back to the Will Rogers thing too, a little bit.
How? I have him at 5 and 7, and I have some weird turn on them.
No, you hype up Mississippi State and their players every time that we do a show. You've been doing this since we first started doing the show. You were hyping up random defensive linemen. I'm trying to remember who it was.
Okay,
and Emmanuel Forbes, who stinks in the NFL.
Emmanuel Forbes led the SEC in pick sixes.
You told me that he was going to be an elite NFL player, and
you also told me that Anthony Richardson was going to be a really good quarterback. And today he goes 2 of 6.
No, wait. He was 2 for 4 for 25 yards. He threw 4 passes. I watched Emmanuel Forbes get cooked over the top today. All right, we need to get back on track.
Okay, one play.
Let's get back on track. Okay, that was all last season too.
He literally broke the SEC record in pick sixes and interceptions in a season. Emmanuel Forbes.
Cool.
Didn't stop that he was a bad college football player.
We're getting off track.
All right. Look, let's go back to your 9 through 16. You have Kentucky at 9 here, Joe. I have Kentucky at 10. Let's get to them. Your thoughts on the Wildcats going into this year?
They were, I think, our first preview that we did, and they're another team that has a lot of room for a stock rise. Offensive coordinator turnover. Liam Cohen moved on to the NFL. He was not a good fit for what they were trying to do just in general. I know that you're replacing Ray Davis. There's a new step in with Chip Trayanum at running back. Offensive line, I think, is strong enough for them to get by. But where I'm excited is Brock Vandergrift taking over this offense. I feel like he is going to fit with what they will eventually try to be doing this upcoming season. Defensively, they're scary good. Maxwell Harrison, I love watching that kid play. He is really, really underrated. Does not get enough love as one of the best defensive backs in the country, and arguably he's a top 4 corner in the SEC right now. He is a very disruptive player, great length, all that stuff. And then Jamon Dumas Johnson coming in playing in the middle is going to be racking up a ton of tackles. and we all know I love Deion Walker. So this is going to be a very underrated season for Kentucky, and they're going to get slept on most of the year.
Are they going to open up offensively is going to be a big question. What does Brock Vandagriff look like? Let me ask you a question. I know I just asked you one. Let me ask you another one about Kentucky.
Yeah.
Are we logo looking? Let me explain what logo looking is. Are we looking at Oklahoma, Missouri, Texas A&M, and when we compare them to Kentucky, saying, "Oh, well, those, we got to put these teams here because if they got this, and this." Name a position group when we look at A&M, Oklahoma, Mizzou, etc., that Kentucky doesn't have either an equal or maybe a little bit step up. Now, Missouri is a little bit of a stretch when you want to talk about wide receiver, quarterback, and running back potentially. But, Joe, that defense is going to be something serious. I wonder if we're logo looking. Do you think that we are? Do you think that we should have Kentucky higher than what we do?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm higher on them than you are because where I put them
you are
at 9. I think that it starts to get a little bit too rich when we're pushing them up as high as 7. But this all comes back to my point. If there is a team that didn't make my top half of the conference that ends up being top 6 unexpectedly, I think that Kentucky is easily that pick.
Potentially. But they could be a middle tier team. But Joe, look, you went to the portal. You spent a lot of money to get some guys here. Joe, how are they going to be better at receiver? Getting the kid from Macklin from North Texas. Mm-hmm. What is Brock Vandagriff? Right, and I think that is going to be the ultimate
huge question.
It's a huge question. Joe, they could be a 5th team in the SEC because if you get really good quarterback play with elite defense, we see what happens. Right, like we've seen in history what happens there. That's why I ask if we're logo looking on them. It's going to be interesting to see about Kentucky. Joe, very quickly before we get to 1 through 8 here, I got Auburn at 12. You have Auburn at 11. I feel a little bit icky putting Auburn below 10, if I'm being honest. I don't know why. I just don't feel right putting them at 12 and you having them. What are we missing? What is Auburn missing? Like, why do I think that Auburn's going to be better than us putting them in at 11 and 12?
I think that Auburn is going to be exactly as good as they were last year, or they're going to be better than last year, which is why they're working their way up. They're moving up into this power ranking. They have a really nice young core, especially at receiver. But when Peyton Thorne looked as bad as he did in some of those games, like not even going over 150 yards passing, had to run his way into offensive production. With all that happening, you can't really put your chips on the table for them. You just can't. You're going to get burnt. It's not like a Graham Mertz type of a progression where Graham Mertz, we saw him shine at times, and then he just lost his juice. The offense did not mesh with what his skill set was when he was at Wisconsin. He goes to Florida. He has better players to throw to, a better offensive outlook, a better offensive coordinator in decision-making, and he improved. That's not the case here for Peyton Thorne. I think that he could improve his production, but I'm out. I don't think that he's really got what it takes, and it's disappointing that they weren't more aggressive in trying to add one of these premier players in the portal.
Here's the thing. I think their front 7 is one of the best in the country that nobody's talking about. The production that they're bringing back with the dudes that they added in the portal, Joe, they had an issue in the interior of their defensive line. They bring in 2 pretty stout dudes in the interior of the defensive line from the portal. Take the offense out for just a moment. Joe, I don't know if defensively we don't look at them and be like, man, they're going to keep them in every game. It's going to come down to, can Peyton Thorne in this offense have a remote pulse to get to win them games?
Exactly.
Like, Joe, I look at that Oklahoma game and legitimately ask the question if they can win it. That's how good I think that their front 7 is. And I think it's I honestly believe that they are a team that Oklahoma comes in there, they beat them. It's because we come on here the next day and talk about how their front 7 had just shined. Joe, I will remind people, Alabama, Georgia, the two games that front seven's like really played up to their level of opponent. That's the kind of things that I'm asking. Joe, can they get over the hump at times? I'm gonna be real with you. I know that we just talked about Kentucky being the team that could be a middle tier SEC team that no one talks about. Hot take. Mine's gonna be Auburn because I don't think I'm not a Peyton Thorne fan. Okay, nor do I think that he has a massively high ceiling. Right? I think he's
right at it. He's like right at his ceiling.
Potentially. But I don't think it gets worse in year 2 under Hugh Freeze with him. I think it's going to be better, actually. And
this is my whole point with, not to cut you off, but this is my whole point where I don't disagree. An improvement is likely going to come because it's second year playing with him.
Do they win 2 games that they lost last year that they shouldn't have?
Possibly. And their schedule feels maybe a little bit harder. But what I was getting at, though, is that he has more time to get acclimated. He joined late in the process because of
summer.
During the summer. My whole point is that a little bit better for him is 200 yards a game and 2 scores and 2 touchdowns. Like his numbers and then his on the field performance watching him play was abysmal at times. He's a great runner. He did a great, which is an underrated trait that nobody gives him credit for. I just don't see him as a passer, and I don't see going up against these top teams.
Fall camp intel from them. What do you make of him being better throwing the football? Now listen, this isn't me going out there looking at it asking. Coming out of camp, there are people that are saying that he's throwing the ball with better decision making, he's on better timing, and he's making better throws. What are your thoughts on that being the? I mean, look. Yeah, of course he is. Cool, sure.
Yeah,
what do you make of that report?
I'm sure that he's improving, but we always have to take everything with a grain of salt. So the taking with a grain of salt is, yes, he has taken a step forward and he is more comfortable now and he is familiar with everybody. But him getting better, what does that look like? He needs to be more than just well below average. He needs to approach.
Let me ask you this.
Average.
Could he get back to what he did 2 years ago at Michigan State? Because let me say this. If he is 25 and 8, 25 touchdown passes, 8 interceptions, which he was 2 years ago at Michigan State, Joe, they're going to win 9 games because that front seven is nasty, dog.
No, come on, man. 9 games.
Joe, yeah. Yeah.
I don't think that roster is that good that if he has a much stronger season that they go 9-3. 8-4 is their highest. So if
they score 10 more touchdowns, they're 8-4 last year.
That was last year. We're talking about this year.
So what is him taking a step forward? Because you can't say that he will, and then when he actually does, that them losing games. That's not how that works, right? Like, I mean, we can't say that he takes a next step in those close games that they lost. Do they lose to a Georgia? Do they lose to a Bama?
The Alabama game is so unique in what happened that we can't totally use that as evidence for anything because of how batshit crazy the whole game was. That doesn't really tell us.
They lost in that they. Do they lose to LSU in the fashion that they did?
I can't see. I don't like doing these hypotheticals though. I really don't because there's no right or wrong answer. It's all just hypothetical. I don't think that there's
a talking season, big dog.
I understand. Well, we're not doing hypotheticals to project. We're looking back at what happened last year and saying like, well, what if I don't know. I don't think
I'm higher up than you are. Watch out for that front seven. I think that they could be nasty.
This video is sponsored by the online fitness training camp presented by Chris Gates Fitness. When I first started talking about Chris, about partnering with our show, not only was I excited to have a fitness sponsor for our pod, but more importantly, when I found out about how he can help people achieve their goals, I was even more bought in because when the football season starts, it is so tough to stay on top of things and also to be able to enjoy yourself on Saturdays when it's game day. With Chris Gates Fitness's online training camp, you're going to be able to effectively stay focused, consistent, burn fat, build muscle, and do it with a like-minded community of individuals working towards the same thing. On top of this, you're going to be able to get direct coaching from Chris and the ability to ask him questions with an access to a live Q&A where you can get direct personalized support from Chris himself. Don't wait any longer. If you're trying to get in shape during this fall and you want to be able to do it with the right support system, head on over to chrisgatesfitness.com/trainingcamp or click the link in the description. And you need to do it today because you can get the first month. Personal training is expensive, folks. The first month for only $10 when you use that code Ruffino Joe. Don't wait any longer. Head on over there. That terrible. BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.